Hello and welcome to the 2020 Leads 2.0 Assistant Principal Rubric Training video. During today's webinar, we will look at our statutes and rules governing leads, check out the new rubric design, as well as review what types of evidence may be collected during this process, and what's next. Speaking of what's next, let's play a little game of true and false with everyone's favorite topic, statute and rules of Act 295 of 2017. I'll ask a question. You decide if it's true or false. I'll take out the time a little bit in case you'd like to pause it if you are having a group discussion. So let's go. First question, true or false? Assistant principals must receive a yearly summative evaluation until they become a building principal. Is this statement true or false? Hope you enjoyed that music, and the answer is false. So each building level administrator shall be evaluated in writing under leads, except during their first 3 years of practice. That's regardless whether you are a principal or an assistant principal. However, there is a caveat. That is being required by the state. Your district may still determine that they would like to provide a summative rating every year, even during your first year. And that takes us to question number 2, true or false? The assistant principal supervisor must base the summative rating on evidence collected throughout the year. The answer, friends, is true. A summative evaluation shall be based on the Leads 2.0 rubric and multiple sources of evidence. And you see those evidence right there on the screen. Let's see how you do with question number 3. True or false? Just like teachers, assistant principals must collaborate yearly with his or her supervisor to create a professional growth plan. Give yourself a pat on the back if you said that answer is true. Professional support and learning are based on a leader's professional growth plan created to help the leader improve professionally in their practice. And wow, just like that, we are here at our final question. You know what they say, time flies when you're having fun. So true or false, my friends? A building level administrator is not protected by teacher fair dismissal, and therefore is not required to be placed in intensive support based on poor performance ratings. Enjoy the music while you think. So the reference in the rules is kind of long, so I'll paraphrase for you. The answer is false. As an assistant principal or principal, for that matter, you can be placed in intensive support for low performance ratings on the rubric or for ineffective practices, and tenets of Arkansas Teacher Fair Dismissal Act are followed during that process. And with that, let's transition to rubric design as our next section. During this part, we're going to discuss the purpose of the rubric and actually take a look at it. And right on cue, purposes for team leader evaluation. That is to ensure quality in our schools and also to support you as a professional as you learn and grow in your new role. Part of that process is the following procedures. As an assistant principal, you will still have a professional growth plan. You will still have observations by your principal. You will still have your supervisor collecting evidence, conducting formative assessment conferences, and as stated earlier, at least every 4 years as a minimum, a summative rating at the end of the year. Remember, those summative ratings can be yearly if your district so chooses. What are the benefits of this rubric and framework? Well, first is that it has the common language, so that you know that if you are an assistant principal in a large school district, for example, that the standards for you in school A are the same standards that are being held for the assistant principal in school C, D, and E. And if you happen to be, in a smaller school district, you're the only elementary assistant principal in town, you know that whether you are in Bentonville or Texarkana, Darmot or Jonesboro, that you are still being held to the same standard. We also share these understandings. You're able to have those conversations, a reflection on your practice, and then when you do get together with your colleagues and discuss whether that's at the co-op or the state level, or you're just out having Mexican food on a Friday night, that you're able to have those professional conversations and be speaking the same language. Something you may notice about your assistant principal rubric is that it has the same format or a similar format to that of your tests and the Leads 2.0 principles rubric. Domains, components, elements, levels of performance, those are all included in the assistant principal rubric, just like they are the other rubrics. I'll give you just a few seconds to kind of check out the screen, review and refresh the definitions of each of those levels. As we have those conversations, it might be handy in just a little bit. And with that, we're going to take a look at the 4 domains. If you still need a little more time to discuss the definitions from the previous slide, you can always hit the pause button and continue that conversation. Let's check out the 4 domains. We have school organization and management, school culture and climate, domain 3, teaching and learning, and the final domain, professional responsibility. As you saw from the previous slide, there are 5 in domain 1, there are 5 in domain 2, there are 5 in domain 3, and 5 in domain 4, for a total of 20 components. That's right. So you will notice on the screen that 4 of them are highlighted at the moment. That doesn't mean that they're any more special than the other. They are simply highlighted today for instructional purposes. So we will not be reviewing all 20 components today. Instead, we're simply going to take a look at the 4 that you see highlighted here on your screen. So today we are going to look at time management, safe and orderly schools, instruction, and personnel management. Now, obviously, it would take forever for us to look at all of these components. We want to give you the tools that you could do this on your own with your assistant principal if you are the principal watching. And then if you are the assistant principal watching, and that you could take this and sit down and go over your expectations with your supervisor. Let's dive right in by looking at Domain 1, School Organization and Management. 1C, Time Management. So, time management. What a great place to start if you are a new administrator or if you are a veteran administrator. One thing that you will always struggle with is, how do I have enough time in my day to do everything that I need to do? If you figure that out, feel free to email or call me, and I'll put you on the webinar for next year. You may have noticed here on Time Management 1C, there are 2 elements listed as well. The first element being there on the very far left-hand side of your screen, called Strategies and Tools, and the second element, Master Schedule. For this exercise, I am going to actually read something I hate to do during a training, but I am going to read the effective column for both the principal and the assistant principal component of this. So what I want you to be thinking about is any different language that you hear, words that stick out to you as I read, and then I'll actually give you a little music time to read all 4 categories on your own as well. We train our beginning administrators with the same technique, which is to focus on what it means to be effective. So if you were a beginning administrator working with teachers, we would want you to look at what makes that teacher effective in this component as you before you walk into a classroom, so that you know what effective teaching and practices look like, and then you can kind of mirror your way to the left or to the right as you need based on the actual language of the components. So let's get started. Effective time management for strategies and tools and master schedule. The principal organizes and manages personal and organizational time through a preferred system of planning, prioritizing, delegating, and directing. The school master schedule is based on student learning needs, not on building or adult convenience. For example, content, knowledge, social learning environment. The schedule includes the school's teaming structure, and systems and schedules are in place when school begins. For the assistant principal, to be effective, you should effectively organize and manage personal and organizational time, assist in managing a student-focused master schedule, as in content, knowledge, social learning environment, and the master schedule includes the school's teaming structure. So at this point, let's just give you a few minutes to think through and notice, where is the language similar, where is it different, what words may jump out at you, and then also give you just a little bit of time to read ineffective, progressing, and highly effective as well. So sit back and enjoy. All right, I hope you had enough time to check that out. So, two pieces I'm going to point out to us in this part of the rubric right now under time management is first about the language following the period in the assistant principal rubric. It says effectively organizes and manages personal and organizational time. You notice it doesn't include through a preferred system of planning, prioritizing, delegating, and directing. So what we expect at this point is that the assistant principal isn't focused on delegating and directing others, that they are growing in their own personal time, where you notice that the principal not only has to manage their personal time in general, but they also are doing that by utilizing others. At this point, the assistant principal is all about themselves as far as being the person who they are managing in their life. So they are trying to really focus in on themselves. What practices do they need? What preferred system of planning do they have? And what does it mean to prioritize? And then if you just sweep your eyes to the right on the assistant principal's area to highly effective, you'll notice the last line actually involves delegation. So to be effective, it does not require delegation. To be highly effective, an assistant principal does delegate and asks for help when needed. And then the second system that you may notice is in the top part, the schoolmaster schedule is based on student learning needs. And the brunt of that is on the head of the principal. When you look to the assistant principal rubric, what you'll notice is that this goal is for them to assist in managing a student-focused master schedule. So they are assisting in the management, whereas the principal is actually part of the creator in ensuring that it is effective at that moment. Next, let's transition to Domain 2 and Component 2A, Safe and Orderly. Once again, we're going to be looking at the effective column for right now. I'll give you a little listening music or reading music, I guess, to read ineffective, progressing, and highly effective once we have that done. While I am reading, be listening for any words that stick out to you or any differences that may jump. So, to be an effective principal, according to the rubric, it says physical facilities are clean and in good repair, creating a sense of order. The student handbook is current, clearly written and distributed. The school's crisis management plan is current and meets all requirements. Emergency drills are practiced and documented. The school and local community members are confident the school is safe and orderly. For the assistant principal's rubric, to be effective, you should actively support physical facilities, which are clean and in good repair, assist as needed with communication through student handbooks, encourages a crisis management plan that is currently practiced and documented, and the school and local community members are confident the school is safe and orderly. So, take a minute, discuss, think, read, enjoy the music. For those of you who may be wondering, that piano music is titled First Snowfall. Now, let's get back to the rubric. Hopefully what you picked up on in Safe and Orderly Schools is that it is the responsibility of the assistant principal to support, assist, encourage. The responsibility of ensuring falls on the principal. However, the assistant principal is active in all of those pieces, actively supporting physical facilities to be in good repair, assisting as needed with communication through student handbooks, and is encouraging a crisis management plan that is practiced and documented. That may be encouraging it with teachers, it may be encouraging it with students, it may be encouraging it with your custodial staff, or who knows, even your principal. Maybe your principal isn't an effective leader in that area, and therefore you are encouraging that to take place because you know that's what needs to happen. And before we leave 2A, I almost forgot to point out the elements identified with this, which are facilities. It's a focus on facilities, student handbook, crisis management plan, and perceptions. This takes us to our third domain, teaching and learning. And we're going to look at 3B, instruction, which has 3 elements attached to it. Student focused. A building leader should be reflection driven, and also protect instructional time. So let's get busy looking at what it takes to be an effective principal and assistant principal. The principal ensures instructional practices are effective in meeting student needs. Evidence for monitoring instruction and data on student progresses are the basis for addressing all student levels of performance. School instructional time is valued and protected from disruption. For the assistant principal, he or she should support instructional practices that are effective in meeting student needs. Evidence for monitoring instruction and data on student progress are the basis for addressing all student levels of performance. and school instructional time is valued and protected from disruption. As you listen to the music, what words jumped out to you? What similarities do you notice? And what differences do you notice? And then as the music plays, go ahead and let your eyes wander into the ineffective, progressing, and highly effective categories. Well, on this one, there aren't a lot of differences between the responsibilities of a principal and the responsibilities of an assistant principal. The one word that sticks out to me uh, as I'm reading through this is in the very first sentence. If you are the principal of the building, it is your responsibility to ensure instructional practices are effective. As the assistant principal, your job is to support that instructional practice that is effective in meeting student needs. And we're going to discuss a little bit about evidence and the different types of evidence. But if you are the assistant principal at this point and you're sitting there thinking, okay, that's great. Well, let me ask you, what evidence could you provide to your principal that shows him or her that you are supporting instructional practices? And one of the really important reasons this is here is that, and I don't know if you all know this, but principals, we have a sticky reputation for making our assistant principals do the old quote, duty and discipline. And in today's world, that simply isn't good enough. And that is why this assistant principal is so important, and why you will notice that there are so many similarities between the responsibility of a principal and their assistant principal. The bulk of shouldering the responsibility and the word ensure, for example, is there because we want our assistant principals to be well prepared in that moment when maybe you retire and they take over the building, or you go on a 6-month sabbatical for something, or hey, let's be real, in our current situation, you're home being in self-quarantine due to COVID-19, and your assistant principal is leading that building. And so what we want to ensure for ourselves at this moment is that he or she is prepared. And if all we have them is stuck down in a cafeteria for 2.5 hours a day conducting lunch duty, they're not going to be prepared. So think about that as you talk to one another, or just as you reflect. And finally, we're almost to the finish line. Professional responsibility, domain number 4. We are going to look at 4B, personnel management. There are 3 elements at 4B: recruitment and hiring, induction and career pathways, and conflict resolution. Let's take a look once again at the effective column as I read that for you. An effective principal, it says, works to ensure an effective staff through the management of staff turnover and promoting the capacity of existing personnel. The leader facilitates conflict resolution by empowering others to settle differences and maintaining consistent follow-up. If you are the assistant principal, you are going to foster effective personnel management by assisting with selection and induction, and by supporting, evaluating, and retaining quality instructional and support personnel. The leader facilitates conflict resolution by empowering others to settle differences and maintaining consistent follow-up. As you listen to the piano music one last time, reflect on any phrases or words that stick out to you, or similarities or differences, and then go ahead and peruse the other 3 columns of ineffective, progressing, and highly effective. So, personnel management. What did you notice? What stuck out to you? Maybe you noticed that really the only difference here is that as the assistant principal, you are assisting in a lot of things. Well, I guess that's where the name assistant principal comes from at the end of the day. That once again, it doesn't fall upon the assistant principal's shoulders to burden the hiring of staff. However, for principals, we want to encourage you to involve them in that process. If the first time they sit in on an interview, for example, is when they are a principal, then we have not done them justice. So we want to give them an opportunity. And then also think about what would that evidence look like during the evaluation process if they are not assisting you with test observations. And if you're not having those conversations, then we clearly have outlined in the rubric that they need to be assisting with that. And that wraps up that portion of the program. Remember, we only looked at 1/5 of the total components located in the rubric. Took us about 20 minutes to do that. But we don't want you to stop here. We want you to go back and to look at each component. Look at each element. Identify those words and phrases. Find the similarities. Find the differences. And as you're reading those, be thinking about evidence, because that is what we are about to talk about now. And I just love this picture. You know, this kind of just a picture for life and humans in general. We have those people who are pumped about everything, the scared, and just the, oh my goodness, we're about to go down this road again. But I promise it's going to be short and sweet and hopefully be reinforcing for you. If you are a beginning administrator, we'll be going into more in depth about the types of evidence that you can collect during your test credentialing training. But if you've gone through that process before, this should be a no-brainer for you. With that, let's dive into the evidence pool. A few facts about evidence is about the facts. Remember, evidence is reporting facts. It can include statements, actions, behaviors. People often forget that artifacts, this is where that can come in. Data as well. It's not about your personal opinion. It is about what you can prove, and it is selected as a result of professional judgment. There are 4 categories of evidence that you can use. We got your direct observation, and that is where the evaluator actually is observing you as the assistant principal performing your job. You have your indirect observation. These are systems that are observed that are a result of your work as the assistant principal. And the best part about indirect observation is you actually don't have to be there in order to get credit for it. It could be something that you spearheaded, that you trained on, and now the principal is seeing it in action. You also have artifacts. These are documentations that are physical of your work. And then data. This can include all sorts of information, student growth as a result of your work, improvement of school quality. Maybe it's something along the line of community relations where something has improved due to your work. You have more parent volunteers, for example, and you can show the data from when you started a project to when you finished and how parent volunteering has increased along those lines. Remember that all of these are able to be uploaded in EdReflect. So you may be sitting there going, Andy, that's great, but can you tell me just what type of evidence you want from me? Well, we don't tell you that at the state level. This is the opportunity where you sit down with your assistant principal, or assistant principals, you sit down with your principal and you say, hey, Mr. Miss So-and-so, what type of evidence would you like to see? And if I were the principal sitting across from you as my assistant principal, I would say, I want to see the type of evidence that demonstrates your effectiveness. Maybe that's artifacts, maybe that's data, maybe that's direct or indirect observations, whatever it takes in order to be able to show and prove effectiveness or progressing. Remember, especially if you are new, that's why we give you that time frame of 3 years to improve and to grow, because as a beginning principal, you may not be effective right now. You may be sitting there as a 10-year veteran principal looking at this rubric and saying, Andy, I'm not effective right now either. It's not about that. It is about growing. And we talked about that at the beginning. So, where do you set your professional growth goal? Well, clearly somewhere that you need to grow. So, use this rubric to identify those areas. Use the language in the rubric to identify the help that you need in those areas, so that when you get to the end of the year, you are not the same assistant principal that you were when you began. Which brings us to our final slide. If you haven't been to the DESE webpage lately, I hope you go and visit it because it has been reorganized, especially the administrator tab. You can find Commissioner's Memo, Arkansas Ready for Learning links, induction, EdReflect help, all sorts of good educator data, and the Leader Excellence and Development System, otherwise known as LEADS, is there. And when you click on LEADS, you're going to find the following information. The link to this full assistant principal rubric will be there. We only looked at 4 of the 20 components, but you'll be able to see the entire rubric. You'll also find a link to this webinar if you'd like to watch it again. Just a little bit of Andy wasn't enough and you want to watch 33 more minutes of me, just watch it again. And then also, if you are sitting in a district and you were saying, you know what, Andy, this was great, but I'd actually like to take and do this training live with my group of assistant principals. Well, we are going to provide you this PowerPoint and a facilitation guide as well. I hope this has been helpful for you. As always, we are here to support you in any way that we can. Our job here at DESE is to support you. I am Andy Sullivan, Director of Licensure, andy.sullivan@arkansas.gov, wishing you the best year of your life.